Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. I'm now going to talk about Star Trek Discovery, and this will be a review of the Season 3 premiere episode, That Hope Is You Part 1. So as usual with these reviews, I will be going into spoilers, so if you haven't indeed watched Season 2 or indeed Season 1, then I would advise you to stop watching now, go away, catch up with Season 1 and Season 2 and then come back into this review, because I will be talking particularly about the ending of Season 2 and then of course in depth about this premiere episode here. So you have been warned, so we will now get into this episode, and I think overall this was a eventful episode. It was very action packed, it was very lively, there was good dynamic between Sonequa Martin Green and David Ayala, who plays Book of course in this new episode here. So it was very much action packed and kept you on the edge of the seat, but I think overall it had some of the same tendencies that I think a lot of people, particularly if you're a purist of Trek, that you'll find very frustrating, that it's continued in the same tone, aesthetic as what it does for the previous two seasons. So I think in short, if you were a fan of the first seasons, then I think you would have enjoyed this episode a lot. But if you had a lot of issues with the tone and direction of the previous two seasons, then I think you will probably find yourself more frustrated with this opening episode. So we're going to go into it now. So as we all know, at the end of Season 2, of course, the Discovery crew had to go into the future timeline because they had to lead the space fighter away from the dangerous artificial intelligence known as Control. And again, I'll bring this up one more time. It was very controversial because a lot of fans are still querying, as I am, that they didn't need to go, because as we all know, Control was destroyed by Zhao prior to the Discovery going into the future timeline. So they could have been stopped and prevented. Maybe we'll get some sort of context in this third season, but I'm not sure. But that's just a quick query I've got to get out of the way again. So we begin with this opening episode. So we see at the beginning a man is getting up, and it looks as if he's in some sort of Starfleet building. He's preparing himself, he's getting dressed, he's brushing his teeth, and he's getting up in a new chamber. And then we go away to the next scene here, where we get the new character Buck, played by David Ayala, and he's in this chase sequence from an alien known as Cosmo, I believe, and it's involving him stealing his cargo ship. And this is where we get the occurrence of Michael Burnham in the Red Angel suit. It picks up the space-time anomaly, as I explained before, and then she crash lands into the ship, and then that's when she descends onto the planet. And we get these opening sequences here where we see Michael Burnham scanning the planet for life forms, and then the ship tells her that there are, and she's very jubilant, she's very excited. Very, I think, over-exaggerated scenes where we see Michael Burnham screaming up in the air. She's very jubilant, of course, the fact that she feels that the Discovery crew is out there somewhere. So in her mind, they've all made it safely to this future timeline. So it was a very, vocal scene that we had on there, but fair enough. And we see later on that she actually destroys the Red Angel suit. Now, this makes sense because, of course, by destroying the Red Angel suit, you kind of ensure that nobody else can get the technology and go back in time, or maybe go back in future, maybe disrupt any kind of timeline or effect within the current continuity. So it does make sense that they would destroy the Red Angel suit, but I always thought that she would wait until she reunited with the Discovery crew and they were all together and they were all safe and sound, and they confirmed their place within the new future timeline, and then they can move forward. Because I suppose once you destroy the Red Angel suit, there's kind of no going back. You're kind of stuck in this future timeline, and I'm pretty sure throughout this season there'll be some other sort of device or technology or MacGuffin that will ensure that the crew can get back or travel back closer to the current continuity that they left. I'm pretty sure we'll get that in this season, but that was just something I queried as well. So we carry on, and Burnham comes across the ship of Buck, and then that's when he comes across her, he attacks her, they fight, and Burnham wins, of course, because she's Michael Burnham, and they start bickering and arguing again. He doesn't want to know who she is, doesn't want to introduce himself to her, and I think this is just me maybe going over speculative here, but if you notice that he wouldn't let her tell him her full name, right? She says, "I'm Michael," and then he's constantly interrupting her. So I hope this isn't any foreshadowing as to maybe Buck is some kind of distant relative or descendant of Michael Burnham. He's part of her bloodline later on within the Descendant future, and we find that out later on within the series. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about Buck's origin in the future, but we do know, obviously, that Michael Burnham, the show has really configured her character to be extraordinary, extra important, extra special. We've got that in season 2. So I hope that they don't do this again within this season, that there's some sort of connection and bond, genetic or kind of blood or DNA connection between Buck and Michael Burnham. I hope they don't do that and just keep them as they are, because they do have good chemistry between them. So they discover that they are in the future timeline of 3118. They go to Buck's ship and they see that he's got this really large cat. That's who he is, kind of companion. And then later on they find out that they have to go back to the main city, and what they want to do is trade in some of Michael Burnham's old tech. So in order, they need to try and get as much as they can the substance known as dilithium, and that's really a key component throughout this future timeline, because when Buck is explaining to Michael Burnham about what's happening in his current continuity, he tells her that somehow the Federation has disappeared. It's completely gone. It was completely collapsed, and this was following an event known as the Burn. And this was basically when, as Buck describes it, the galaxy took a far left, and a lot of the dilithium that is used, for the warp drive and the energy throughout the galaxy, that a lot got destroyed throughout the galaxy, and that had a major effect on the Federation. And over time they just disbanded, they just disappeared, they just faded out of existence. And Michael Burnham is very shocked. We get these couple of scenes of Michael Burnham showing very emotion, because as we all know, the large institution that was the Federation. But that is the current continuity that we're in here now, that dilithium is this really precious material, this precious source that everybody is relying on. So they go to the Requiem city to trade in some of her weaponry to get this dilithium, and we see here that Requiem is a kind of a very bustling metropolis. I got those Blade Runner vibes. It's got the same kind of aesthetic that you see from that movie. We got all the flying ships and the bustling technology, so I just got those vibes when I looked at this city. We see here that Buck and Burnham, they get to the Courier. They initially meet some resistance, but once they find out what potential they've got, they let them through. We also notice, of course, that we've got portable transporters now, so that's very convenient as well, and we see that later on in the episode, which I'll explain more, but that was something that I noticed as they're walking through the crowds. So as they go through to make their transactions, we get a few more conversations between Buck and Burnham, and then of course he double crosses her, he traps her in some sort of stasis field, and he takes the dilithium from her and he leaves her to be captured. And then we get this really weird scene, to me it was weird anyway, where they've got Burnham captured and they obviously want to find out what she knows. So they spray her with some intended truth serum, and it has this really kind of hallucinative effect on her, and she's in a daze, and then she starts getting all super hyper, and she's laughing and she's talking really fast, and she's really zany and wacky all over the place. And it was really out of left turn, because you don't see that kind of wacky tone in this show so far, particularly not from Michael Burnham. And it reminded me a lot of that scene from Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. If you remember from that movie, it's when Sam comes into the presence, I think, of the ancient artifact. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it is the Fallen, and we have that scene when he's talking really fast in the classroom and he's dysentered all over the place. I found that scene really annoying, and I'm sorry to say I also had the same feeling here. It was just really annoying just seeing Michael Burnham just talking really fast. I didn't really find it funny. I understand they were going for some sort of brisk humour here, maybe to give Michael Burnham a bit more of a loose personality, but for me it just didn't work. It was just really annoying, and again I think a lot of the purist Trek fans may also have a problem with this. It's just against really the kind of tone that you get a lot with Star Trek. But it went on for a short while, but luckily throughout the episode Michael Burnham eventually snaps out of it. So Buck gets captured by Cosmo, the alien that was chasing him from before. They go to shoot Burnham when they recapture her, but then she snaps out of her truth serum, and her and Buck, they fight and escape. And then we get a lot of action-packed escapades here, where we see Burnham and Buck running, shooting, jumping, chasing. We get a lot of the histrionics and hyperactives that we associate with this show, the lens flare, the shaky cam, the quick fast edits, the pew pew sound, the shootouts, the laser scenes. Again, all of those things that, depending on where you're coming from, you'll either find really enjoyable and fast packed, or you might find annoying again, and you may feel that this is not really in keeping with the spirit and tone of the original Star Trek. So it really depends on where you're coming from. And it's quite fast paced and it's quite energetic, and they're using their portable transporters to zoom out of the way into the Outland. And I mentioned them before, and the catch with these is that they have to charge up, so you have to wait 30 seconds before you can use them again. And I'm not sure whether you have complete control of whether you're transporting. Again, everything was moving at such a fast pace. It seemed almost that they were transporting themselves into just random places just to get away. But again, I think the other caveat with these portable transporters is that they can be traced. So that's why the soldiers were able to catch up with them so quickly. So we had a lot of back and forth, and Burnham, she's snapping in and out of it. She's constantly hitting Book and then running away from him, and they're waiting for the transporters to charge. In the end, he can't do it quick enough, so they jump off a cliff into water. And because they're in the water, that means they can't be traced for now. So Burnham hits him again, and then after a while, she gets injured, and then Book, he wants to cure her wounds. So he starts going into the water and meditating, and this causes a plant from the water to help heal Burnham. And then they later try to contact Discovery through another device, but they can't get through. And later on within the story, we then find out a bit more about Book and his origin, and it turns out that he's kind of a part of this race that can have contact with certain organisms, right, and certain technology. And he talks a bit about his origins and that his parents were killers, and he doesn't really have much memory or much fondness for them. So we get a much more insight into his own backstory, and I'm sure we'll get more development throughout the season. So the soldiers catch up with them again, and Cosmos gets blown by one of the soldiers. They trap Book and Burnham. They ask them for the secret code to open up the ship, which is in a cloaking device. He gives them the code word sticky, and the cargo doors open, and we see that there's a really massive earthworm type of creature in there, and it attacks all of the soldiers that they're after. And then we get a really funny scene again, funny weird I think, rather than actually funny intentional, where the worm kind of bites or eats Burnham, or tries to eat her, and Book able to calm down the creature and get him to spit Burnham out. So again, I don't know, I think it was a bit unnecessary. I think you could have just had Book talk the creature down. You didn't have the creature eat Burnham and then spit it out again. So whatever, it was kind of those again. I think they were trying to just provide moments of levity and humour throughout the episode, but again, everything's moving at such a brisk pace. I wasn't annoyed overly about it too much. So Book mentions again that he has to go back to his home planet Sanctuary 4, I think, and when we go there, we see a lot more of these earthworm creatures, and we see a lot more of his group of people, and I'm sure we'll get more context about who they are throughout the season. And I suppose it is an interesting aspect when you get a new race of people or a new species of people, and they've got these new abilities that we haven't heard or seen of before. So that's got some promise about it, and hopefully they provide more development for it going into the future. So then, as Burnham has described to him throughout the episode, she needs to find some sort of contact with the Discovery crew. So they go to this outpost where hopefully she can find some way of communicating with the crew, and then we catch up again with the man that we saw at the beginning of the episode, and we find out that he is a long-time member of Starfleet, and he's been waiting on this outer base for over 40 years, hoping to come in contact with someone who I believe is from the Federation or Starfleet. He's been looking for people, but the technology that he has only limit him to scan certain sectors, 30 sectors I think, something like that he mentioned on there. So when they try to mention or search for Discovery, they have difficulty finding it because of the limited scope of the technology that they're using. So he describes who he is, and essentially he tells Burnham that he admires her because she of course reveals that she was a member of Starfleet, and then that's when he shows her the Starfleet flag that he has. And again, this was just him keeping this as a symbol of hope that maybe one day he would come into contact with someone from Starfleet. And then that's when we get the development at the end, when Burnham decides that yes, she needs to venture out and find out where the Discovery crew is, but she needs help. She can't do it on her own, so this man here will be her kind of communications officer, and along with Book, now she has her own mini crew as she goes out to search for Discovery. So that was really the overall events of this episode, and like I said, if you want to judge it as a premiere episode, it was very lively, it was very spectacular, lots of special effects and great kind of action sequences and great location shots, but you would expect that from a show with a hefty budget as what Star Trek Discovery has done. So I think as a premiere episode, if you're looking at it to try and get new people into the show, I think it worked because you had the recap of course from season 2, and then I think they did really well in focusing primarily on Michael Burnham first and understanding where she is within this continuity, and then of course within the next episode, that's when we will focus more on the Discovery crew and where they are. And you'll know that if you look at the future clips after the episode has finished. So I think it was a sound beginning. Obviously, as I mentioned before, it depends on where you're coming from regarding this show. If you do indeed like the kind of modern filmmaking techniques that they use, you think Discovery is very much up-to-date contemporary sci-fi action series, then yeah, you'll pretty much enjoy what you saw from here. But I think again, for any fans who, as I mentioned before, are more of the OG Trek and they want everything to be much more about the politics and the exploration and the interaction between different species and cultures and the exploration aspect of it all, I think again they'll probably be disappointed because this very much continues in the same style and aesthetic as what the previous 2 seasons do. So I think if you're not already on board with Discovery, I don't think this premiere episode did anything to try and get you back on board. So it depends on where you're coming from, but I think from my opinion, despite a few kind of annoying elements of the show, particularly with the Michael Burnham scenes when she's in that truth serum, and yes, some of the hectic pace of the episode with the shaky cam and the quick edits, I think they just hopefully need to tone that down and make it a bit more coherent with the action and the special effects that we're seeing, so at least you can enjoy what's going on if you can make out what's going on. And looking at the previews for the rest of the season, it very much looks again that this is going to be a very action packed and spectacular show, which is good, but at the same time I think they need to make sure that they can concentrate a lot more on the story and the characterizations and the themes, and make it less of a blockbuster feel and much more, if you like, of a focused science fiction thematic show. You can have the action and the special effects, that's great, and the spectacle, that's what you want. You don't want it to become an overly talky show, but I just hope they don't kind of go back into the common traits that they went through with season 2, and where it kind of descends a bit more into over convoluted, over spectacular, over action heavier. Hopefully they can delve more into the storyline and we can get much more of a thematic show along with the action and the spectacle. But overall I think it was okay. I'm still enthused to see what happens next, and of course I think the interesting elements will develop even more once we catch up with the rest of the Discovery crew in the next episode. So those are my thoughts on the season and open premiere of the 3rd season of Star Trek Discovery. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Was this an episode that you enjoyed? Did you like a lot of the action? Did you enjoy the chemistry between Sonequa Martin-Green and David Ayala? Do you think that's a pairing that will be able to sustain itself throughout the season? Or were you frustrated by this episode because you wanted to catch up with the other members, Saru, Tilly, Stannis, etc., and maybe that's will interest you more once we get the Discovery crew back together again and we establish really what is their main goal and what is their main role within this new future timeline that we're in. So So those are my thoughts on the season 3 premiere of Star Trek Discovery. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please hit those like and subscribe buttons and help me to try and grow this channel as I provide more content for you. We are experiencing good growth now. We recently crossed 100 subscribers now, and I will do a separate video for that shortly in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.